The storytelling aspect of your personal life, it's so similar to the storytelling aspect of business, really. If you can't articulate your own self, your own person, you can't tell your own story, then you don't really know yourself well enough to move forward.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. Sometimes a joyful rebellion isn't about walking into a new career. It's about walking away from the life you thought you were supposed to live. My guest today, Wes Towers, hit rock bottom when his marriage ended and the mask he'd been wearing for years finally cracked. From nights sleeping under his desk to rebuilding himself through therapy, breathwork, cold plunges, and even plant medicine, Wes discovered how to create space, find real friendships, and step into a new version of himself. In this conversation, we explore what it means to let go of old identities, embrace simple but powerful practices, and rebuild a life on your own terms. Get ready. This one's raw, honest, and deeply human. Wes Towers, thank you for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today.
Fantastic to be here. It's my late evening and your early morning, I believe.
It is. You're in Melbourne, right? I don't even know how many hours that is ahead of us, but it's 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. where you are. It's 9 a.m. where I am on the East Coast. So yeah, it's cool that we can do this over so many time zones. So thank you for staying up late.
My pleasure. Looking forward to the chat.
It's going to be a fun chat because, you know, a lot of people who I interview on the podcast, we talk about what they do for a living. And sometimes what they do for a living is a result of a joyful rebellion that they had years ago in their life. And they did the work, they came through it, they made the hard decisions. And what you do for work, we're going to talk maybe a little bit about that, but we're going to talk about your journey that got you from where you used to be. And then, as you described, you had to have your own joyful rebellion. And for some people, a joyful rebellion is kind of forced on them. They have to evaluate their life and say, okay, things need to be different. And sometimes the things are going great on the outside. The job's good. The relationships seem all right. But on the inside, something's strange. But you had a little different experience. So I want you to start talking about that. And really, I want to land the plane kind of back on your healing journey through what you were experiencing.
Yeah, to speak of joyful, I had a crisis time in my life just over 3 years ago now, which nothing of that season in my life was joyful, really. So what had happened, I'd found something in my marriage which I felt was irredeemable. And so from one day I was in the family house and the next day I was sleeping under the desk in the office. And over the course of years, my health had deteriorated. A lot of things were wrong with my life, personally, physically, emotionally, just years of not being joyful, I suppose you would say. But also being able to wear a mask through that as well. A mask, not just hiding my own self to people, which was certainly true, but also hiding, I didn't even know really who I was. I kind of got married at a young age, and all my adult life, that was my life, and it was around that certain context. But I had to discover myself. I had to come to the end of myself to find myself, if that makes sense. So
you bring up something really interesting about the mask, because I'm experienced this in my own career, my own life. Would you say you didn't know yourself exactly because you were whoever you needed to be in the context to just get whatever needed to get done accomplished? Yeah. So people didn't give you any grief. Would that be kind of a close approximation?
That's a good way of looking at it. So sometimes your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness. So I created an ability to compartmentalize incredibly well, even to the point when I was really in that downtime. I was crying on the floor, a blubbering mess, really emotional, run my own business, just in my little office there. And I realized I had a really important meeting in 5 minutes. My eyes were like I was convulsing and shaking. And I just pulled myself together, had this capability to pull myself together and present. And I won the biggest contract, whatever. We do websites. Biggest deal that I've ever done off the back of being in an emotional distress state. So at that time, I thought that was wonderful. I mean, I could just pull myself together and I could get through this stuff. But also someone highlighted to me, hey, you got some deep-seated issues going on and you have to really address that stuff because it's no way to live long-term. That's not a joyful experience. And I recognized that. I was grateful to my friend to highlight that to me. Then that's when the work really started to begin for me, working on myself.
Do you think it was your friend saying something, or you knew all along that something needed to be different? Like you were at this point, you knew something in your relationship was irredeemable, so that was going to change one way or the other. And then you knew that you were kind of in this transition period, this no man's land of, okay, where am I going to be spending my evenings from here on out? And then you've got all of this grief. You experienced a lot of loss at that point. And then you're still doing okay at work because you can compartmentalize, like you said. But then was it when your friend actually said something that you were like, oh, okay, the outside world sees it. Now I got to figure this stuff out, because you saw it yourself and you were in it. Then your friend said something. Was that the turning point for you?
I would say so. I mean, it was so blatantly obvious as well. It was something I knew, but it's always good for friends to tell you the blatant, honest truth as well. And so off the back of that, that's when I got a psychologist. And here in Australia, they give you 6 subsidised sessions. So I did that. And it was fantastic because I was fortunate to get a really progressive psychologist who encouraged me to do a whole bunch of things like breath work and micro little changes that I made in my life to establish who I was and make space really to think about, well, what does life look like now and how do I create the best life that I can under the circumstances. Things aren't perfect by any means. I mean, I still miss my kids because I don't see them as much as I'd love to, but to build as best I can a life that I want, that's successful and happy. Really some breakthrough times, just the simple things like breath work and just making some space really to do that.
Yeah, and making some time for yourself. It's funny because when someone goes to a therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever it is, and they start talking about the issue they're having, the experiences I have, the conversations I have with people it's kind of in 2 camps. They end up in a situation like yours where the person says, well, yeah, you're going through a lot of stuff. You need to make some space. You need to do some breath work. You need to maybe figure out some different physical exercise because a lot of energy comes out from that. Or they're in the camp where they get a prescription when they leave the office. And I've had both of those experiences myself, and tore the prescription up at one point, and I was like, okay, this can't be the rest of my life. This doesn't seem good at all. I've also talked to people who were like, oh my gosh, yeah, I went to an appointment and I told them what was going on. I'm stressed, I'm this and that, and they start telling me about breath work, and it's almost like they're rolling their eyes and they're like, how is breathing, because I breathe every day, I haven't stopped breathing since the day I was born, so how's breath work going to do anything? And I was like, okay, that's cool, you're not quite there yet. But when I hear that from so many of the guests, they're like, yeah, I started working on breath work, meditation, started moving my body more. And it's just all these things that we're starting to hear a lot more of. That's not a magic pill, it's not a magic bullet, it's just simple stuff that works. So talk about that a little bit. What was your first reaction when the person you went to see said, okay, have you thought about breath work? Did you roll your eyes? Were you like, this is ridiculous?
Yeah, that's right. So being in business and I suppose being quite a driven person, I mean, going even because I said you get the 6 subsidized sessions, I had a goal. I was going to be healed within the 6 sessions.
Healed?
Yeah, I was going to be totally over everything and I'd be on the path. I mean, there's pros and cons in that too. So I think I was further through the path, having set intention to be healed, restored, however you want to describe it. I wasn't certainly fully realized, but at least I was on the journey. Just micro little things that I changed. You mentioned I started going to the gym. I made that a part of my weekly habits. Just little things like that. Being a driven person, we're the types that won't do things like breath work and will think it's a bit of woo-woo. but they're really the things we need the most because we're so switched on and engaged and active and busy, and our minds are so racing. We're not just stopping. And so doing breath work is meditative. So it's stopping you from all the busy chatter in your mind just for a bit, because you've got to concentrate on what you're doing for breathing. That's one thing. But also, obviously, the physiological thing of getting the oxygen. I'm no doctor, but all I know is the experience was fantastic for me. Even just a practical standpoint of just stopping, but also I think the benefit of breathing properly. Maybe when you're anxious, you don't breathe properly as well. So that's a benefit as well. Well, that's what I found. So
I know for me, I have a comfort level with the exhale. And some people inhale and hold that when they're tense. With me, it's the opposite. I exhale, and that's sort of the comfort level. And then I have to sometimes remind me, okay, I need another breath here because I lose it. And breath work, if someone's never done it, there's 1,000 ways to do it. I mean, you can do what they call the box breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, then you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold that exhale, and then you keep going. That cadence sends me into a tailspin. I can't, it feels limiting to me, which is part of maybe an issue I need to work out myself. But I do breath work, I do meditation every morning. I do journaling. I have a morning routine, and it's not long, it's not lengthy, it's not elaborate, it's just really simple. And that can be the most difficult part of my day, is to just settle down.
Yeah.
And not be trying to fix problems, work out things, solve issues. It's just, okay, be and breathe. Way harder than it sounds, especially if you're running your own ship and you are trying to figure out, okay, what's next? How do I advance these projects? And who do I need to get in touch with, collaborate with to make it happen? So if someone's listening right now and you've never done it, try it. I mean, try a couple of different versions, because I personally have been doing it for years and haven't found one that is the way. It's just one that kind of fits what's going on right then. And if it doesn't work, maybe try a different one.
Yeah, I tend to just jump on YouTube and mix it up a little bit at times. I've got my go-tos as well. I did Wim Hof method as well, just on YouTube. I also did some cold plunges, not ice, but I have a cold water bath fairly regularly. All these little things, just little things to shift how you're feeling at the time, and discipline as well, were really helpful. So, yeah.
I will say I've never done a cold plunge, and man, me and the cold are not best buddies. People are like, oh, cold showers change your life.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, for me, one of the most miserable things ever. After you get out, it's like, I don't take drugs, never taken drugs, but I can only imagine the euphoria could be pretty similar, because it's like your whole body is pulsing and radiating, and you're like, what the heck just happened? But I feel great. And the problem is I don't feel great enough to go jump in there again, knowing how crazy it's going to feel when you're in it.
That initial pain, I know. It is hard. You just got to bite the bullet and do it. So that's part of the challenge. I find it really great for sleep as well. So if I'm a little bit anxious, I'll do it in the evening before I wind down, and just somehow resets me. And you're right, it is kind of like, I suppose it's almost like feeling a little bit drunk if you've had, not drunk, but if you've had maybe a couple of beers sort of thing. It's just that relaxed kind of feel. And it's completely healthy.
It can't really hurt you. It just hurts your feelings when you're in there thinking, oh, I'm so sensitive to all this cold. And we're talking like shower cold. We're not talking about polar bear plunge or anything. You said something when we first connected about what it means to walk away from who you were supposed to be. And that's a theme that comes up on this podcast a lot, because we grow up and everyone around us has expectations of us. And I'd say for the most part, they are well-intentioned expectations, like, yeah, my baby's going to be president, or whatever the great aspiration of the parents are going to be. So they want you to go to school and learn all the things you got to do to be successful later in life. And maybe you're in an institution, whether it's a educational one or a religious institution, and they start applying all their hopes and dreams on you as well. And then sometime maybe around teenage years, we start to think about, okay, what are my hopes and dreams. And of course, being teens, we're completely oblivious to realities, which is a good thing, I think. So maybe we start thinking of stuff that is cool, sounds pretty cool, but we've got to get to work on it if it's ever going to happen. But what was that like for you? And what do you mean when you say you got to walk away from all the things you were supposed to be?
Yeah, as you say, so we all have perceptions of what life is meant to look like. And I guess it's muddled to us to some degree. We become what we've observed with our own parents and so on. A little bit of backstory. My dad, he grew up in an orphanage, so he didn't have the greatest of models himself. He did incredibly well given where he came from and his start. So he was a good dad, all things considered. But you do model on what you've seen, and so that's not necessarily ideal or the best fit. So there's that aspect of my childhood, but also I grew up in a church which most people would determine to be a cult. So all that religious expectation sort of set all these things that sort of form who you are. And so growing up in that and then getting married reasonably young, I don't think I was really well equipped to be married. But certainly the time when I moved out of the family house, that's when everything was challenged. I had to kind of walk away from everything emotionally and then just think about, okay, what's the path forward? What do I actually believe, even spiritually as well? Because a lot of these things were just set in me because that's how I was brought up. So that was the big thing. So considering all that and thinking about, okay, is there different ways? Is there a different set of beliefs? And certainly there was. And I suppose I'm much more open-minded now and probably more just open to other people's worldviews and perspectives. I think I'm less judgmental, potentially. I don't think I was verbally judgmental to people. I was always kind and gracious to people, but probably on the inside, maybe I wasn't so much. So going through the ringer myself, I had no position to be judging anybody else because I realised I wasn't all that great either. So everyone had their challenges and everyone walks their own journey. So that's what I've kind of felt like, just like a dissolving and rebuilding of me.
You knew something had to change anyway, but when your friend said something and that sort of kicked off the appointments with the psychiatrist and the growth that you were having. You started with things that we've already talked about, like the breath work. You started going to the gym and you started incorporating those things into your life. And those are simple things and sometimes not easy to figure out, okay, I've been doing this for a week straight. Is this working? I have no idea. And same with the gym. If it's a certain kind of day, I'm like, I don't want to see that place again. What am I going to do? Just go get sore some more? What's going to happen there? And you don't know if it's working, but I want to ask kind of a two-part question. Like, were there other things that you incorporated that you did start seeing some significant results, even though maybe you thought they were too simple to make big shifts in your life? And then the second part of it is kind of what was the timeline for you there where you were like, all right, everything's going to be cool?
Yeah, well, it was kind of a long journey because I suppose it's pretty common, certainly here, it's probably common everywhere, that the whole divorce and separation and financial separation and all the other bits and pieces, it takes quite a bit of time and there's always different perspectives, obviously. And so there's a lot of tearing apart and breaking down and perspectives that may or may not be true. So oftentimes I felt like I'm good now, I'm good to go, everything's all right. And then something else would pop up and derail me a little bit again. But eventually those derailings became less and I had tools in my arsenal. So I built habits of things that I would do regularly. So go to the gym regularly, but I'd have tools that would help me regulate. So great little tool, like even I had a Garmin watch, but I've got an Apple Watch now. It tells you like if you're stressed and your heart rate and all that kind of stuff. So I could see that I could lower my heart rate pretty quickly with doing some breath work and so on, certain techniques. That was helpful as well, just to have some ways and mechanisms to regulate yourself.
That's pretty interesting because you're in marketing. That's what you do for your work. You help construction companies market themselves, create websites, and get data that lets them know if the marketing's working. So you're kind of a data driven. You work in the creative part, but you like the data as well. So if you've got data on your wrist and you say, oh, okay, I've been sitting at this desk for 3 hours, it's time to get up and get some steps in, or my heart rate is up, but I'm just sitting here. What's going on? Then you can do some breath work. And if you do the breath work because you've been practicing it for a while and now you can see, oh, my heart rate has gone down. That's data. That's not just, ooh, I feel better. That's actual data. So that's pretty cool. If anybody listening, I mean, there are ways to get hard data on some of these things that seem completely esoteric at the time. And you're like, I don't know if this is working or not. But if you can measure your blood pressure before when you seem a little stressed, and then maybe after some meditation and see a difference, well, there you go.
Yeah, 100% exactly. You nailed it. That's how I'm wired. I'm creative because I design websites. That's the beautiful creativity and data driven. It's like a science and an art type thing. So that's why I love the industry. It's about setting yourself up with the things that might work for you, and that blend is perfect for me.
Yeah, that's cool. For everyone listening now, I just want to set up why I was so excited to talk to Wes, because Wes went through some stuff, right? He had his joyful rebellion. So many of the people that you've heard me talk to on this podcast, it's like, yeah, I went through my hard time in life and I came out as a trauma coach, or I wrote a book about it or something like that. Wes got through it and now he's willing to talk about it, but it didn't change his career. He is more open to helping people understand what he went through, but at the same time, he didn't make a business around it. So I think it's so important to talk to people like you who have so much to share, because there are a lot of us out there who made big changes in their life because they had to, because it wasn't going in a great direction, and came out the other side, and they do want to help people, but they're not necessarily going to write a book about it. They're not going to start a podcast like I did. That's what I did to do it. I'm not a coach. I still have my same old job as I did before. But one other thing I love to talk about is the amount of time that it takes before you're in that part where you're like, I can see that the things I've been doing I'm making progress in my life. And just like you like that data part where you were like, I'm going to heal myself in 6 sessions with this mental health professional. Then they gave you some homework that wasn't exactly a rigid, in 10 weeks or in 12 weeks, you're going to be a completely new person. So how long was it before you looked at your calendar and you're like, oh, X number of months or years have passed and I'm cool. Things don't affect me so much anymore.
Yeah. I reckon it was 2 years, nearly to the dot. That was the realization, hey, yeah, I'm through this now. I'm a new person. The old's past, the new's here, all that sort of thing. So
like Wes 3.0 kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And so but the interesting part, I go on a fair few podcasts, and usually they're business related because it's great for promotion and all that stuff. But this one really was interesting to me because, I want to help people by my story, but also the storytelling aspect of your personal life. It's so similar to the storytelling aspect of business, really. If you can't articulate your own self, your own person, you can't tell your own story, then you don't really know yourself well enough to move forward. Same with a business. If you can't really articulate precisely who you are and what sets you apart, what makes you different and all that sort of thing as a business, as a brand, what sets you apart in the world so you're unique and people want to know, like, and trust you, well, it's really difficult. So the same set of core foundational things that make us human are true in business and in personal life, I believe. So this is a different and new experience for me, obviously, to talk on your show, and I'm enjoying it. But it is really interesting, these key foundational things that make us tick in this AI world. We're still humans.
Yeah. I feel like AI is going to make us much more human than we understand right now. When it comes to the simple things, you started with breathing, you started with the gym. It sounds like you do some YouTube research, and I'm famous for this. Anybody that knows me is like, I live on YouTube. If I need to figure out how to do a DIY project, if it's something about health, if it's something about wellness, I'll go there first. Then I'll figure out, okay, who's just trying to sell supplements and who's trying to give information. Then I'll see, okay, who agrees with who. So it's like a big rabbit hole. But in your journey to healing, in that 2 years, were there any other techniques? Were there any other things? You kept going to the gym, you kept the breath work, but what else did you add to it?
Yeah, well, there's one really key time where I used plant medicine, which was really great. I'm careful how I approach this because other people might have different experiences and I'm not a doctor and all that kind of stuff. And there's legal things that you can and can't do in different nations. But for me, in that experience, it truly was medicine to rewire my brain to a degree. So I went through it, not recreationally by any means. I followed the same model that I learned. I did some assisted breath work with a facilitator, and there was a whole process of setting yourself up for that with intentions and so on. So I followed that same process through plant medicine so I could create as safe as place as I possibly could to go through that and to have intentions to have some breakthroughs and so on. So it worked really well for me. I realized some people have a bad experience, so I tried to minimize that as best as I could with setting up a good space for that. But I think there's really some profound benefits. But again, I'm not a doctor, but what would I know? But for me, there was profound benefits. That's what I can say, absolutely.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. When you look back on Wes, let's call him 2.0, after that 2 years, and you look at what you learned, what would you say were some of the top 3 things you learned going through that painful process of deciding who Wes 3.0 was going to be? Like the top 3 things that you look back and you were like, Wes 2.0 needed to learn this thing that I know now, and this thing that you kind of made part of you. Looking back, you're like, oh, well, that's why my life was like that, because I didn't know these things or I didn't do these things.
Yeah, I think one of the key things actually through the breath work, I saw a vision. This is going to get super woo-woo for some people, but that's fine.
That's cool. We're used to it here.
I saw a vision. It was quite an intense breath work facilitated by the guy. We had didgeridoo and everything, music in Australia, so that's a thing. So I saw a vision of a stereotypical Jesus and Satan, and the face was sort of oscillating from one to the other. And because I'm there with intention and trying to understand what it might mean, and I realized I had the potential to be both good and bad. And I also realized they were kind of stereotypical things, but life is a bit more messy than that. And within me, there's good and bad. I made errors. It helped me to forgive as well through the whole process, to realize I made lots of mistakes, more than I could probably identify at the time. I'm a flawed human, and that's okay because we're all on a journey and we're progressing and we're trying to get better and we learn. So I think that was the key lesson. That's super woo-woo to see the vision and stuff, but that's what happened for me. So the data just kind of guides his head.
Yeah, that's what got you there, was the starting the breath work and then getting a little deeper into the breath work. And that brought on the realization. So it wasn't like the breath work was a means to an end. It's not like that was going to heal you, is the experiences you had during that time. Was there any other thing that you look back and you're like, oh yeah, that guy, do you see yourself as someone like the 3 years ago version of you? And you're like, yeah, that guy just didn't know.
Yeah.
Poor dude.
Well, it sort of answers the question. It's so a really valuable aspect of my values, a really important thing to me are relationships, friendships, and that sort of thing. So I'd let all those types of relationships kind of lapse. Like I wasn't investing into people, and just from a friendship perspective. So that was an intentional adjustment to make sure that I got around some friends that, regular friends. There's different spheres of friendship. So some really close friends, I think, was really important. I had some peripheral friends, people, acquaintances, whatever. But to get some really close friends, I think it's possibly more difficult for men. I'm not sure. I think men don't relate too well to each other necessarily, particularly in rough times when you need support from other people. Probably isn't our strong suit. Well, it wasn't mine. I can say that confidently. So to realize, hey, I'm a relational kind of person. I like people. I like hanging out with people. That's actually important. It's an important part of my regular weekly and monthly activities, to not just focus on business and getting stuff done and getting work done, but to hang out and chill out and to be a buddy to people and so on. So that was a part of the joyful rebellion. Like, we're so busy, especially running a business. Make space and just have fun, enjoy life.
That's a good point, because I'm imagining right now, and I know this is true for me. This is true for me on the daily, is something you said earlier, is making space for something, because you don't have to be a business owner. You can be a busy mom who's driving their kids all around, and you could be someone who works a lot and then you feel like you don't have the energy or time for life outside of that. But it's not until, in my experience, and it sounds like what you're describing, is not until you start to make space and prioritize and be really intentional about some of those things that you enjoy, you like.
Yeah.
And then like keep going back to the breath work and the gym thing. Maybe you don't know you like that yet, but it's not going to take away from your life if you make space for it and put it in there and be intentional about it. Then you just see how it goes. Life is just a series of little experiments. And I think when people stop experimenting, stop trying new things, stop seeing what could happen if I do this or that, that's when you fall in a rut. And that's what it sounds like you were in several years ago before you started doing the personal growth. And I'm curious, talking now about relationships, talking now about how you got intentional about fostering relationships, who was there for you as you were going through this? Because so many times people I talk to on the podcast, either it was a career joyful rebellion, and they had to just figure out this was their identity for 30 years. And now they want to do what their heart's passion is. And they've got a spouse there. Your spouse was not going to move forward with you in your joyful rebellion. And your job, your career did. So now I'm curious about like who the people were who were key, because that can be so important.
Yeah, so for me, there's 3 good buddies of mine, James, Tim and Dan. So the 4 of us, we spend a fair bit of time together where we can, or at least we've got a messenger chat always on the go. So they're the core buddies, I suppose. We're in my corner, and fortunately, even like from day one, I was able to pull those guys together pretty quickly and to keep that going. I suppose because I was in desperate need, that kind of probably recognized that. So maybe the group in some ways was pulled together out of that desperation for me. But yeah, it's a great thing. So we're doing things on this weekend coming, and that was really good. So like you mentioned, I can't remember what triggered this thought, but you're saying about like, so I worked on my personal self and I didn't change career paths. I actually started working less in my business, but the curious thing was my business grew phenomenally. I've just reported the best financial year ever. And I really do believe it's because I've built a better self. So I'm better equipped to work in a far more efficient way. So I'm doing far less work hours than I used to, and just far more profitable, just ridiculously better. So I didn't have to change career paths. I just adjusted my personal life and things got better work-wise as well. So
That's interesting. That's really cool. And it sounds like you got intentional about that as well. I do this every Sunday and sometimes midweek, but I just look at my calendar and I plot out every chunk of time I'm going to devote, because whether I do something or not, that time's going to pass. So I want to make sure it doesn't pass without at least me having some sort of say over it. And it's all color coded. And I would have never done this before my own Joyful Rebellion. I barely had a calendar. I remember when I was in the thick of things and I was going to therapy, and my therapist was like, "So you ever thought you might be ADD?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's not fake. That's what my brothers did back in the 80s so they could get away with just being rowdy all the time." She was like, "No, you might want to look into it. It's a thing and you have most of the symptoms." And I was like, "Okay, sure. Like what?" And she was like, "Well, do you have a calendar?" I was like, "A what?" "A calendar." I was like, I don't know. I'm sure somewhere around the house is a calendar." She's like, "But do you have a calendar? You mean like that I put my stuff on? I just remember everything." And at that point in my life, I was good at remembering everything. So I showed up on time. I was always on time. My point is, with what you're talking about, is I categorize everything. And then when I look at it, sometimes I realize, oh crap, this is all work stuff. This is all like me doing the grind. When you do the grind, you can do that for a little while. And sometimes you have to at certain points in your life. In my calendar anyway, you have to make space. Literally, you got to slide a little slider up and you got to like, okay, in this chunk of time, I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to have coffee with this acquaintance, or I'm going to do this other thing that's just for me. And when you see a visual, I'm a visual person. Some people, this wouldn't make a difference, but when you see and you make that space and you're like, okay, I did that. Like I'm in control of doing that. It can be a little daunting because you're like, oh no, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing, or I don't want to see people, or whatever the case is. But when you literally go in there and you carve out some space, which is the same thing as carving out some time for your life, you start operating. I know I did. I started operating in my business very differently because I realized I couldn't just grind on the business all the time. And anyone who does enough work in the personal development space, especially if they're an entrepreneur, they hear this all the time. Like, you can't just grind on your business 24/7 and expect big results. Well, I was like, okay, that for years and years, I was like, that's for other people. That doesn't apply to me because I am great at the grind. And they're right. You just can't keep that grind going forever. When you go have coffee with people, when you go interact with the world, things open up and new opportunities just present themselves. If I'm not behind my computer all the time and I'm out engaging with life, so many other cool things happen. And it's all serendipitous, and it's all like some of that woo-woo maybe that you talked about is like things just happen, but they do. It's wild. Yeah. So I can totally relate with what you're saying. Well, Wes, if someone's going through something similar to what you went through years ago, like this bomb dropped on them just this week, they're listening to this and they're like, I don't even know what the first step is supposed to be because they didn't have friends like you do. What would be the top thing you would suggest for them, just as a friend?
It's so difficult, and every set of circumstances are different, but the feeling probably is the same thing: desperation and loss. Actually, this happened the other day. I was meant to be recording a podcast with a guy, and he wanted to talk about my background story. And I said some of the things I've said today, and he's got a little bit teary, and I could see he felt he was about to experience something similar. All I could do in that instance was just say that how he feels today, eventually it will pass. These things do pass. So it's just a matter of going step by step through the process and day by day, just getting through the days, getting through the weeks, working out where you want to end up, and just realizing it's going to take some time to journey through that. Because in my instance, and I'm sure if other people experience similar things, it's a real sense of grief because the whole life that you've built is dissolved and broken down. You've got to do some soul searching, and maybe you did some things wrong, but maybe things have been done wrong to you. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter so much. It matters how you're going to move forward. And so that's how I would help encourage people. But I mean, my friends, just being there, just getting around people that support you, they never really know what to say or who does.
Yeah.
But to just know people are in your corner, that's the best thing you can do. Pull some friends in and they'll help you through the process.
Yeah, that's good. And sometimes in those times in your life, you get to, fortunately or unfortunately, you get to know who your real friends are, because those are the ones who not only stick by you, but the ones who maybe hold up that mirror like that first friend did and said, hey, man, you got a great business, but you got to get all the rest of this stuff over here pretty in line, because if you don't, it's not going to be a fun ride.
Yeah. 100%.
That's cool. I've got your website right here. You help companies market themselves. Tell me a little bit about how you got into that and what is it that gets you all jazzed. You talked a little bit a few minutes ago about loving the creative side and the technical side, which I can totally relate to because I've been in photography for the last 30 something years, and it's a big dose of both. There's a lot of technology to have to figure out with software and equipment and things. And then there's that whole creative piece. So what is it about that for you that you love helping companies, like construction companies, market themselves?
So it's really exciting times actually to be in the industry that I'm in, doing the websites and the SEO, search engine optimization. We're calling it search everywhere optimization because people are using ChatGPT and the like to find companies now. But it's exciting because I think we kind of touched on it before. It's kind of forcing us to be more human, and that's kind of my thing. That's who I am. I like connecting with people. I like the human element of life, relational. So the AI, because it's conversational, the way in which we use ChatGPT and the like, that conversation is human. So it's trying to replicate what we've always done, and it's forcing us to think in that way. So even working on a lot of websites at the moment, and trying to get them as much visibility as they possibly can. And what I'm saying and helping them to achieve is to find their own unique voice as a brand. It's kind of like finding your own voice as a human, as a personal brand. The way in which you communicate, the way in which you speak, because anyone can punch out some content from ChatGPT, but that's just the average of everybody else's thoughts, collated into one piece. That's not your thoughts. That's not unique to you. So to have your own voice, so that's the way in which you communicate things, your own voice, but your own message as well. So it makes you unique in your industry. That I find that really exciting, to have those conversations with clients and to help set them up with the right tools. So to think through those two things, the voice and the message, but also set them up with the tools so they can use AI to help leverage those two thoughts into their own websites and so on. So that's, I guess, where the science and the art come together, and that's what gets me excited.
That's cool. And if anyone wants to check out your work, it's uplift360.com.au. Wes, is there anything we haven't talked about that you think is important for people to hear?
I think it's been fantastic. Thanks so much, James. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love it.
Same thing here. I thought it was really cool to be able to have someone who went through an experience, we can talk about it, but wasn't necessarily like, oh, if you want to know more, buy my book. And I love that. And I hope that the listeners appreciate that as well, because in the end, we're all humans and we go through a lot of the same stuff. We come through it in very different ways. It's really helpful for people to hear how other people have experienced that journey of going through it. So thank you for sharing.
If people did want to connect directly, I accept anyone on LinkedIn, and then they can flick me a message if they want to chat about whatever. That's cool.
Good deal. I'll put that link in the show notes. So Wes, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, James. Excellent.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.